Hello everyone, it's Harry Sherrard here. I'm the head of the talks team here at Brooklands, and it's my great pleasure to be interviewing Captain John Tighe about his new book that he's just brought out, Life of a Concorde Pilot. So great to see you, John, and thanks very much for coming along to Brooklands.
Harry, thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me along, and thanks for taking the time to read the book.
I've read it from cover to cover, John, and I'll be dipping into it as we go through our chat. Just first of all, just sort of setting the scene of you as a person, and it's quite a strong theme that comes through the book. You were given up for adoption at quite an early age, but fortunately you found a very loving and caring family who then did a great job of bringing you and your sister up. Absolutely,
yeah. I didn't know much about my natural background until very recently, literally just over a year ago. I knew I was adopted, and probably by the age of 10 or 11, my parents, my mum and dad who adopted me, told me what that meant. But it was much later in life before I wanted to go and find out more about it, because I had such a loving, stable, supportive family around me. It didn't interest me at all really to go and track down my natural background. For every television programme you see out there reuniting children with their birth parents, I bet there's a dozen that go wrong, and I wasn't going to go down that route.
Yes, so yeah, you certainly struck it lucky with the parents that did adopt you and your sister from, as you say, it's the title of the book, from the orphanage. So the second factor that I want to bring out at the beginning is that although you did this incredible thing of flying Concorde to the edge of space and had an incredible career as a pilot, you did all of that with a disability throughout, obviously, which clearly still affects you to this day. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's something that's evolved throughout my life, really. When it started off, it was obvious right from the beginning that I had an issue with my feet and legs, that they just looked a bit strange, and I had a toe that was sticking out apparently. And as I grew up, it didn't hold me back too much. My ankles were very weak, that was the first sign. My right leg was very enlarged, and as I've gone through life, it's kind of changed. And it wasn't until the late 80s really, when I was walking, I'd started to trip over nothing, over fresh air, and I realised that my right foot was dropping, it wasn't lifting properly when I was walking. I kind of parked it like most people do, thinking the problem would go away. And it was in the mid-90s that I eventually saw one of the world's leading neurologists in this issue, because it was becoming more significant. And she diagnosed spinal muscular atrophy. But I'm very fortunate, it was a very mild form of this wicked disease, and it was just affecting my lower legs by that stage. I was fitted with my first ever splint. There we are, I bet you don't get many of these brought along to these talks. I was fitted with that, first of all. It wasn't black originally, it was flesh coloured, and there's a story as to why it's black in the book. So that was the first thing I had. And of course I went to the Civil Aviation Authority doctors once I had first fitted that, just to stop the foot drop. And I expected to lose my job. And
yeah, I was going to say, on the face of it, it sounds unlikely to be carrying on such an intense career with a disability.
Yeah, but they were fantastic. And basically, it was along the lines of, can you still push the pedals? Can you still work the brakes? Yes, of course I can. Well, that's not going to change overnight. They're more worried about people who are going to have strokes and heart attacks and sudden incapacitations. And they said, well, come back and talk to us when you can't. And as the years have gone on, the wastage, the muscle wastage in my legs has slowly got worse. You saw me hobbling in here today. And I've now moved up to next generation silicone ankle foot orthotics. They're Sappos, and they fit nicely in my boots, and I've got one on each foot. And armed with those, I can do pretty much most things in life.
So your route into aviation, because of the disability, I guess it was never going to be via the RAF?
No.
Which was quite a common path for pilots, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, back in those days. In fact, I did go for pilot selection at Biggin Hill when I was a late teenager, and they told me I'd never fly. Not because of my legs. Again, I didn't have the orthotics in those days, and their legs weren't going to hold me back medically. It was because I had a box sinuses or something, and they said I'd never fly because of that. So what I did was I went down what we call the hours building route. I got accepted for Hamble, which was British Airways Pilot Training College, back in March of 1979, and I was going to be sponsored by British Airways to learn to fly. They said they'd let me know when my course was going to start, And in September that year, they wrote back to me and said, we're terribly sorry, there's been another downturn in the industry for whatever reason. We're not having any more training courses. And the words were, we suggest you pursue any plans you may have for an alternative career. And I mumbled and moaned and groaned. My wife, Lynn, bought me my first flying lesson, kicked me up the proverbial backside, and it took me 6 years to get my commercial pilot's licence.
So the handball school is obviously a very important feature in BA's history of that period, but it's completely closed now, isn't it? It never reopened after that period.
Correct. If there'd been one more course, I would have been on it. So it's now a housing estate, and it never ran again. But it trained most BEA and BOAC pilots throughout the 60s and 70s.
So you then, was it at the British Airways Flying Club at High Wycombe, or did that come later? That's where you initially learned to fly?
That's where my first flying lesson, up at Booker. By now, of course, I'm working on the ground within British Airways, so I had several ground jobs along the way. And, but yeah, I learned to fly at the British Airways Flying Club at High Wycombe in there, Piper Tomahawks and then the Piper Cherokee. And got my instructor's ticket and eventually a commercial licence.
Yes, I started learning to fly a Piper as well, but I never got to my PPL. But this is about you, not me. We'll talk about that afterwards.
We'll do that another day.
So obviously then to get a commercial license, then you need to clock up a huge number of hours, and you're a private individual now on a not particularly special salary from your ground job at British Airways, albeit presumably you're getting a bit of a discount at High Wycombe as a British Airways employee. Yeah,
that's right. We did get discounts on the flying lesson rates. But yeah, I spent all my Mondays to Fridays working 9 to 5 in the office by then, and all my weekends and evenings instructing at the flying club once I got qualified as a flying instructor. The first couple of years, it took me a year to get my private pilot's licence, so that's only 45 hours. And yeah, I didn't have the money, I just saved up and did an hour every now and again. And then once I built up enough hours and became a qualified flying instructor, the students pay for the flying, so I get the flying free. So I spend all my afternoons and evenings instructing other people.
Yeah, it always seems to me to be a slight dodge, because really the students doing 90% of the flying, and you're sort of sitting alongside them, but you're still counting that as your flying hours.
Absolutely, it doesn't seem right, to be honest with you. So to get a commercial pilot's licence in those days, you had to have 700 hours, or probably 600 and something or other of those were flown by the students sitting next to me within 20 or 30 miles of High Wycombe, with just me instructing. But that's the way the system worked.
So you duly get your hours clocked up, and you're now eligible for the commercial pilot's license. And I think then the first step then was down air then.
Yes, that's right. I was again working. I've worked for BA for 11 years by now on the ground. And BA just started recruiting what they call direct entry pilots straight in. Ideally, they're aiming at pilots from other airlines and the Royal Air Force. I didn't have any experience, so they wouldn't consider me. So I got my big break with Dan Air. They were absolutely fantastic, and they offered me a job. It's the first person ever, I understand, to go straight onto a jet aircraft. You normally went onto the turboprop HS748, and they offered me a job straight on the Boeing 727. So that was my big break.
I think they said you were a guinea pig, wasn't that right? That there was some leapfrogging you ahead of the normal system to get you straight onto the jets.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I said, this is a great honour to be offered this, but what happens if I don't get through the course? And they said, well, we'll put you on the 748, which is where you would have been in the first place. So nothing to lose. But thankfully it worked out well.
So you then spent a couple of years flying around European destinations, mainly sort of holiday destinations. In the winter as well, they did the winter flights too?
Yeah, it was busy in the summer, like any charter company in those days. So it was your Malagas and your Corfus and places, Alicantes and places like that. And we flew out of Berlin a lot as well, because Lufthansa weren't allowed to fly from Berlin. So there's quite a bit about working out of Berlin, which was fun. During the winter, the workload dropped off enormously, and it was just taking people to the ski resorts once a week. Otherwise, sitting at home and getting another little bit of part-time work that I've written about.
Oh yeah, the modelling side of things, you mean?
Yeah, I said don't mention the modelling. Well, no, seriously, that was a good bit of fun.
So opportunity then, having that experience under your belt, opportunity then opened up to return to BA then as a pilot, and you then worked your way onto the 747 fleet at Gatwick.
That's correct, yeah. So after a couple of years in Dan Air, which is a fantastic company to work for, they were really flexible. It was a small family, very friendly, you weren't just a number. But then I thought, well, British Airways is the place to be really for the long-term future. So I applied and I was successful and got to join British Airways on the 747 Classic, as we call it, the one with a spiral staircase and a flight engineer. And I joined the beach fleet, as we were known. Literally, all we did was fly to the Caribbean out of Gatwick.
And I know in the book you say that you encountered fellow BA pilots from Heathrow, and they always look sort of a bit pale and stressed, whereas you and your crew, you're always suntanned because you always spend these weeks in Barbados and things.
That's right. It was a tough job, Harry. Somebody had to do it. So.
Yeah, terrific period of your life for sure. So the next step then from the 747 fleet, what was that then?
Well, that was Concorde. So I put my name down on the list every year. We call it bidding. We can bid to change fleet. And I put my name down every year, and 9 years later I was next in line to do a Concorde course, which is an incredible opportunity. Mike Bannister stopped me in the corridor, our chief pilot, one day and said, "John, we're thinking of running another Concorde course and you're next on the list, are you still interested?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, your name cropped up this morning and I was asked if you were suitable." I said, "What did you tell the committee then?" And he said, "Well, I'll let them know when your check's cleared." And so it was an incredible opportunity. There had only ever been 27 previous courses in, 27 previous courses in all the 23 years the airplane had been in service. So it really was a great privilege and something I've been waiting a long time for.
But naturally a very complicated machine and a heck of a lot of training necessary to master it.
Yeah, it really was. And I've written quite a lot about that. I've taken the reader through every step of the training. It was the toughest training course in aviation, 3 times as long as a conventional airplane. And remember, of course, that we're going into this as experienced airline pilots. So I've already spent 9 years flying the 747. And it's 6 weeks in the classroom with lots of exams along the way. And then 19 simulator details, again, twice as long as any other airplane. And then we go base training, which you've read about in Seville. That was
so
fantastic.
Tried Shannon, which you go to quite a bit of the training, but the weather wasn't too good. You ended up in Seville. What I didn't quite understand from the book was you said you went to the Seville, and when you got there was crowds on the runway and TV crews and all that. How did they know? How did they know that the Concorde was coming?
Well, it's very flight plans and things had to be filed. And to be fair, we might have arrived and then the word got around really quickly and within a very short time of us arriving. But there were thousands of people there and 3 TV crews on site were covering out every move. It was absolutely amazing.
Just shows what an icon really Concorde was in that environment. It created sort of stir in Spain.
It really did, and it's a word I use a lot when I'm doing my talks about Concorde. I start off by suggesting to the audience that Concorde was perhaps the greatest icon of the 20th century, and I finish an hour later with everybody nodding and agreeing that she was.
Well, I'm a big space fan, and I did the talk here actually on the 20th anniversary of the Apollo 11 landing. So I could probably debate that one with you a little bit, because the lunar module, which obviously launched around about the same time and landed men on the moon in the late 60s and the 70s, has to be a contender as well.
It really does, yeah. But there's guys at NASA who've actually said that they believe that what we did with Concorde was a greater technical achievement than their moon landings. So I mean, yeah, it's incredible because Concorde first flew in March '69. And the Americans first put a man on the moon in July '69. Yeah. So 2 incredible achievements that same year.
But one thing that's massively different in the 2 of them is that the incredible lack of testing of the Apollo spacecraft. Obviously, Concorde was tested for years and years and years before anybody, whereas with the Apollo they put 1 lunar module into Earth orbit, put 1 into lunar orbit, and then the next mission was the landing. I mean, there was so little testing. I mean, it was absolutely a prototype when they actually did it.
Yeah, it would be absolutely remarkable. Yeah. And but with Concorde, of course, it was breaking completely new ground. So first flew in '69, then there was 7 years of testing. There's never been an aeroplane tested to that degree before it went into service in January '76.
So going back to Seville, then you're having your base training, which goes okay, and you end up, well, more than okay, went very well, and you ended up then qualifying effectively as a Concorde pilot. But presumably you're a junior pilot for a few flights initially.
Yes, the way it works, it's not the end of the training. So by the time you've done your base training, your circuits and bumps, you are now qualified to fly Concorde or whatever airplane you've done your training on. So the Civil Aviation Authority take your licence and they stamp Concorde on the back page. All I've done so far is to fly around in a circle at 2,500 feet around Seville. So now we have to learn how to operate it in the commercial environment. So we take it to the edge of space and twice the speed is down to New York. And I did my very first trip to New York just a few days after returning from Seville. So that was a whole different world. And then we spent a couple of months flying backwards and forwards to New York. No 2 days are the same, of course, as for any airline pilot. But
so these were fully fledged passenger flights? There's no such thing as an actual training flight as such?
No. So you're flying with a senior training captain. And for the first few, you've got what we call a safety pilot, so an extra guy along as well, so that if anything happened to the training captain, then there's backup pilots on board, of course. And I retired eventually as a training captain, so the simulators nowadays are so good that if you were an Airbus pilot and you were converting to the Boeing 777, you would do all your training in the simulator. You wouldn't do base training. So your first ever flight of a Boeing 777 would be on a passenger carrying flight with a training captain.
Yeah, so I think one of your toughest assignments in your career had to be the weekly run in Concorde to Barbados. I mean, fly Concorde supersonic to Barbados only does once a week. So you're a week in Barbados and then you fly Concorde back again. That was a tough era.
It was a great job, particularly if you like breakfast. So we'd leave home at I'd probably leave home at 7:30 in the morning, having had a light breakfast. I'd get to work, we'd get on Concorde, and we'd leave Heathrow at 9:30 in the morning. I'd perhaps get served breakfast soon after takeoff. We'd fly at Mach 2 across the Atlantic Ocean, faster than the Earth's rotating, and we'd arrive in Barbados at 8:30 in the morning, local time, so just in time for breakfast.
So, but before you left, effectively,
yeah, absolutely. And then we'd stay for a week.
Amazing. So the aircraft obviously wouldn't remain in Barbados. Another crew would take it back. Then you'd alternate crews each week.
That's right. Yeah, we could just about, same with New York, we could just about legally fly there and back, and it happened. But because of the schedules, the aeroplane would normally stay on the ground for 4 or 5 hours to before it came back again. And absolutely a different crew would have to do the return leg.
So I was talking to Mike Bannister recently, and I asked him if he'd ever had breakfast in the UK, lunch in New York, and his evening meal back in the UK again. And he gave me an extract from his logbook. You stretch it a bit, but he just about did that. Did you ever do anything similar?
Yeah, no, Mike did it and several others did it. But no, it was often if the flight was disrupted for any reason or a pilot had been taken unwell in New York, somebody might go there and back. But no, I just always had 24 hours off in New York and or a week in Barbados.
And so the Barbados flights, I think they stopped then, didn't they? And it became just a New York run effectively then.
Barbados was there till the end.
What was it?
Pretty much the end of the operation. Not when we went back into service in 2001, but it was there till 2000, just during the winter season. So the winter season was 6 months long.
Okay. So as well as that, you flew shorter flights then, so people just would have the experience of Concorde. So out over the North Sea, went supersonic briefly, and then came back in again. You seem to have done quite a few of those flights.
Absolutely, yeah, they were really good fun, and I used to do a lot of commentating on those flights. We'd take an extra guy on a voluntary basis just to tell all the passengers exactly what was going on. We've got 100 enthusiasts on those flights, so they were absolutely a delight. And they were very important because they started in the mid-80s, and they brought Concorde to the real people, the taxpayer who paid for it, apart from anybody else. But Concorde, of course, we all know is very expensive, so this is a great opportunity for everybody in the street to have a go and experience Concorde.
I was at school in the early days of Concorde flying, and I remember Concorde ski, the Russian imitation that went up, and the rumour that sort of went round was that there was a bit of industrial espionage, that the Russians had somehow pinched the plans for Concorde and then built their own. Did you think there's any truth in that?
I certainly do. Yeah, I've heard the rumours, and I've spoken to a couple of people because I used to mention it in my talks, and a couple of people have confirmed that. And indeed, literally in the last few days, there's been a new documentary out on television,
really?
bringing all this out into the open.
Oh,
So
what's
it's
that?
out there. Yeah, it's on just a couple of days ago. And so yeah, one of the key features of Concorde was the engine intakes.
The intakes, yeah. The
and
Russians never managed to master that.
correct. Even though they were, I think my understanding is that they knew there was a degree of espionage going on,
Right.
and some dodgy plans were left lying around at Filton, knowing they'd only
That's coming back to me now. I do remember that they deliberately left out sort of, as you say, defective plans,
Yeah.
and that was the other part of the room. That's why the Russians never could get it flying properly,
Absolutely.
because they'd taken the dodgy plans.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's funny.
You get what you pay for.
Yeah.
And so they could never fly theirs without use of reheat, as I understand it. I think towards the end they did modify it and were able to, but they lost it by then. But
It never carried passengers, did it?
I don't think they might have done on a few flights,
Sure.
but it ended up flying freight across the Soviet Union, as far as I know. So once they flew theirs first, they flew it supersonically first, they rushed it into production with cutting all the corners and stealing various bits of technology, and it never worked properly. Concorde was without doubt the world's only successful supersonic airliner.
So back to your own career, and we have you flying to, as you say, to Barbados and these other passenger flights, etc. But then, of course, come the terrible events of the early 2001. I think then the terrible crash in Paris. And again, we've heard Mike Bannister's talk about that. He was obviously deeply involved in the investigation. And do you want to tell the story of how you were involved when the CIA actually grounded Concorde?
Yeah, so it's 25th July 2000 was the accident, and it was in the afternoon. I was just, I don't forget where I was taking a television in to be repaired in the days when you did get televisions repaired. And my daughter Jenny was in the car, and we pulled up outside this shop in Ashford, Middlesex. And I left her sitting in the car with the radio in while I lugged this big television into the shop. And I'd just flown Concorde literally a few hours before back from New York. And when I came out of the shop, Jenny was sitting in the car with a stony face and the radio was off. And there'd just been a news flash that Concorde had crashed. We didn't know any more at that stage. And gradually the news unfolded and we all remember that horrific day. And I was due to fly again on the 27th, 2 days later. And I did, yeah. There's a story about my dear father and how that affected him, but we won't go there at the moment. But then we carried on flying, and by August the 15th, 2000, the Civil Aviation Authority and the French and the accident investigation people knew enough about the causes of the accident to decide that they were going to have to ground Concorde, albeit temporarily, to modify the aeroplane. So at 10 o'clock that morning, on August 15th, the Civil Aviation Authority phoned British Airways and gave them 24 hours notice that we're going to be withdrawing the certificate of airworthiness. I was on the BA001 that morning, pushing back as usual at 10:30. We just pushed back into the cul-de-sac at Terminal 4. Air traffic control said, call the company on the other box, which means ring British Airways on your other radio. We made that call, and British Airways just said, return to the gate. And they didn't say why. We knew there was nothing wrong with the aeroplane, so we thought it was a bomb threat. And as we pulled back onto the gate, I was the first to open the door, and our dispatcher, our turnaround manager, was there. And she said, what are you guys doing back? And I said, I kind of hoped you'd be able to tell us that. And then after a few moments, the realisation dropped in, the penny dropped. And that was it. We knew we were grounded. We were told not to talk to the media. We were taken off. I had some wonderful passengers on board that day, I'll never forget. Queen Nora of Jordan and her family. And a lovely elderly lady from France. She was part of a tour group going to New York. The rest of her group had travelled subsonically from Nice, and she wanted her Concorde flight, so she made her own way to Heathrow, and she probably never got her Concorde flight. I drove home that day, and literally just 5 minutes from getting home, there was a news flash, and the news had broken that Concorde had been grounded. But as you know, that wasn't the end of the story.
No, it must have been a shocking realisation and feeling that had happened. And I remember vividly, I was in Hyde Park at an Elton John concert during that period. During the August, it probably was, and Concorde came over and with a nose droop. Does that sound right? You have the nose down by Hyde Park.
Yeah.
And there was a collective went up from the whole crowd because, of course, the crash had happened, but Concorde was still flying at that time, and we watched and saw Concorde actually coming into land at at Heathrow, there was a real ripple of emotion through the entire crowd actually when we saw it. It was absolutely very moving actually at the time. Yeah,
just shows how powerful Concorde was, isn't it? That's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. So yeah, and I guess the story is fairly well rehearsed. People know there's the strip of metal and so forth, and the knock-on effect of how the crash happened, and everything was then modified and strengthened, and Concorde then took to the air again, carrying passengers.
Yes, it did. It went back into service, and we were all set for at least another 10 years of operation. We put the Kevlar linings in the tanks, they upgraded the tyres, made changes to the wiring, lots and lots of things. So and put new seats in, new toilets, new lighting. The aeroplane had a great future. And on one of our final proving flights, they'd already done the testing flights, but one of the proving flights was in the air. The plan was always to go halfway to New York and back again. And that was in the air, that aircraft was in the air when the tragedy struck in New York on 9/11.
9/11, yeah.
And that, of course, had a dreadful effect on aviation generally. We physically lost many of our regular passengers, regular Concorde passengers. And
because they were working in the Twin Towers,
absolutely,
so you lost them.
Because 80% of our passengers were senior business executives, so we physically lost them. And we did go back into service. I think in November 2001 we returned to New York, and the mayor welcomed us there. And this is just the buzz that New York needed to get the city back on its feet again. Initially, the passenger loads were quite good, but aviation had been particularly badly hit by 9/11. We had the Gulf War, the second Gulf War kicking off, of course, and passenger loads just dropped off across all the airlines, the first class and business class in particular.
And I think you say in the book that you flew to New York with 3 passengers once.
Yeah, I didn't fly, but I phoned up. I said, "How many's on the BA 003 tonight?" There were 3 passengers. Yeah. It was unsustainable.
Of course, yeah.
And of course, Air France didn't want to carry on. They'd also nearly had another accident that's out there in the public knowledge now, and they weren't flying, and so we could have carried on, but we were going to have to foot all the ongoing maintenance and running costs ourselves.
And I think that's an aspect of the story which I've sort of picked up elsewhere, but you don't particularly major on it in the book, was that Airbus, as it now was, is it fair to say they were kind of losing interest really in the engineering and the avionics back up for Concorde at this point, quite apart from the commercial pressures?
Yeah, it is true. It was we were a thorn in their side, probably. Concorde was a thorn in their side. A bit in the corner of the shed that they've got to keep knocking out spares for, that kind of thing. So they were quite keen, I think, to get us off their backs. So they could control the price of all the spares and maintenance. So yeah, it was only going to go one way. But I deliberately haven't written a lot about that, because Mike's written a lot about the accident and the return to service program and then the eventual retirement program. And this book is about me and my life and my personal involvement, and an inspirational story for youngsters to,
of course.
follow.
So with the sad grounding of Concorde, obviously you had to then transfer across to a different type, and then came up to the 777 then.
It was the Airbus first of all.
Airbus first, yeah.
So that was a great opportunity. When Concorde was grounded, we sat at home on gardening leave, I called it. The garden never looked so good. And then eventually, when it became apparent that this was after the initial grounding, that we were going to be sitting around for quite a while on full salary, it was very appropriate that we went and flew something else. So I expressed an interest in becoming a captain on the Airbus, and literally I started within a few days putting my hand up for that. And that was it was the next step in my career to become a captain. And then I had the opportunity to become a training captain before I even checked out as a captain. So that was a rapid move up to training captain on the Airbus.
And then you moved fleets again then across to the Boeing 777. So was that quite challenging? You've now gone across three different makes, obviously Aerospatiale, Concorde to Boeing to Airbus to Boeing.
I think the biggest step was from Concorde to the Airbus. Apart from anything else, I'd sat at home for 3 months doing nothing. I'd never flown an aeroplane in Europe. I'd never flown a short-haul aeroplane. Never flown an aeroplane without a flight engineer. Never flown glass cockpit, all these modern instruments. So that was a big step. And then to go back to the 777, that was okay, because I'd flown the 747 and 727. So I did have Boeing experience. And I did that for the last 12 years of my career.
and you cover very well in the book then your various last flights and all as your career wound down, because you stayed on as long as you could right through to your 65th birthday when there was compulsory retirement then.
Yeah, absolutely. I love my job, Harry. I was very fortunate, very privileged is a word I use. And right through to the very last day, just as you said, just before I turned 65. And I've written about the emotions and the feelings I had on that last ever flight, funny enough, to Barbados, and how I took my wife, my daughter and my grandson along with me. And yeah, I loved every minute of my career, very fortunate.
And so going back to Concorde again for a moment, and you did mention this. We're obviously all sad that Concorde doesn't fly again. But as we sit here today in 2023, Concorde probably wouldn't have been flying anyway. As you said, there was probably another 10 years in it, so
yeah.
Probably would have started or stopped flying maybe in the 20-teens, maybe something around there.
Yeah, the general consensus is physically the aeroplane could have gone on for a long time, but probably somewhere between 2010 and 2015. It would have been appropriate to stop. I think the financial crisis of 2008 would have been the next big hurdle.
Yeah.
But it would have probably stopped by 2015. So either way, I wouldn't have been able to finish my career on Concorde.
Because by then the avionics are getting pretty dated, aren't they? I mean, as we know, designed and built first in the 60s, etc., to try to keep effectively what would by then be quite an old aircraft when technology and other aircraft had moved forward so much.
That's true, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it was still, absolutely in perfect condition. Even though it was an old aeroplane by then, it only flew a fraction of the hours that a conventional aeroplane did. And corrosion is the biggest threat in motor cars and aeroplanes. We didn't have any corrosion on Concorde. We took it up to 60,000 feet, heated it up to 127 degrees centigrade on the nose. If there was any moisture in it, it didn't last for long. So the corrosion and the fatigue on Concorde was minimal.
So just to finish, John, I've got a great retirement project for you, and it was something that I picked up in the book, and I laughed. Honestly, I had tears run down my face laughing, and I absolutely love the story of the hovercraft, where as a teenager at school you build a hovercraft with 2 chainsaw engines. I mean, I do a bit of chainsawing, I know how now those things are. So one chainsaw engine driving the pump to lift up the hovercraft, and another chainsaw engine propelling it. The noise of that thing must have been unbelievable. So I think your ideal retirement project is to recreate the hovercraft.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell the story of the test and the night before the parents' day or whatever it was?
Yeah, that was amazing. So we'd been handed this hovercraft, a box of bits basically, and got it going. And we'd done a couple of test runs, and I crashed into the school bike sheds, as you've read, stuff like that, and thrown myself out of it. But I think it was a Friday night, the night before the school open day, and we went to test run it in the dark on the school playing fields at Hampton. And my friend Graham was leading the way on his motorbike, light on it. And here I was flying, if that's what you do with hovercraft.
I think you do fly hovercraft, yeah.
Across the school fields with 2 unsilenced chainsaw engines going and a spotlight in front of us. And of course the local residents wondered what on earth was going on and thought the local Hells Angels were ripping the cricket pitches up, and the police arrived en masse, of course, but we got away with it.
Yeah, great story, John. Yeah. So, any chance you think of recreating the hovercraft then?
It would be nice. Yes, I've no idea where it is now. Actually, I'd like to know it still exists somewhere. But that's, I've written quite a bit about my teenage years and things like that, and my time falling off mopeds and various things like that. So it kind of sets the scene. All those school days before leading into my passion for aviation.
So, it's been fantastic talking to you, John. Just to finish with then the writing of the book, because we've got a sort of an unfamiliar looking hardback version of the book here. So what was the gestation of that then?
Well, I never set out to write a book. I started in March 20 when COVID struck. All of a sudden we're sitting at home with no flying to do. I wanted to put some notes down for my grandson and future generations, partly because I never knew what my dad did in the war. I started to write some notes and eventually a list of stories that I could write about, and the list got longer and longer. Also, during the last couple of years of my career, I flew with so many young co-pilots, and I'd come out with the stories, some of which you read, and they'd say, "That's amazing, John, you should write a book, that's incredible." About my time in the slums in India, my time with the charity Dream Flight, going go-karting with Princess Diana, stuff like that, and being in Buckingham Palace with Sully Sullenberg. So I started to write all these stories. My wife and daughters knew I was writing, but they didn't know how far I'd got. When I got back from my last trip, just before Christmas last year, I put the last couple of paragraphs in, and I produced 4 of these, and gave one to my wife and one to each of my daughters, Jenny and Natalie, and made them open simultaneously on Christmas Day. And their faces just went like that. And they were astonished that I'd actually produced a book. You can do that online on the internet. That was very straightforward. It took me 10 minutes to design the cover. And then I thought about, should I put this out there? I mean, it's a bit scary. There's a lot of personal stuff in there. I looked at self-publishing, and when it got to the technical bit about formatting, I walked away from that. And then I saw the History Press, and I looked on their website, and you can fill out a submission. And I filled the form out and described what my book was about. And Amy at the History Press came back to me a few days later. But in the small print prior to that, it had said, we get inundated with applications. If you don't hear from us within 6 weeks, we're not interested, or a polite version thereof. She came back to me within 3 days and said, John, we don't normally do memoirs, but this is something quite special. Can you send me the whole thing? So she said, I'm back in the office on Monday. So I tinkered with it and sent the PDF on the Sunday night. And I'm not exaggerating because I checked the other day. By 10 o'clock on the Monday morning, Amy at the History Press had read enough of that to say, John, we love this. I absolutely love it. The only problem is we wish we'd had it a few weeks ago because we've set all our schedules for this year. But we're going to change them. I've got a management meeting this morning. So they changed them and they've produced that. I'm very pleased with what they've done. And the first print run sold out already, and they're rushing around printing another lot to meet the Christmas demand. So it's meant to be inspirational, moving, and at times amusing, I think I've said.
Well, it certainly is all of those things, John. I very much enjoyed reading it. Excellent. So congratulations on a fantastic career and also on producing the book. Absolutely marvellous. It's a real... I was about to say it's a perfect bookend to your career in a sort of literal and a metaphorical sense. So yeah, it's been great talking with you, John. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Harry. Thank you for your time. Thank you.